Diana Conway. I'm the president of the Women's Democratic Club. This is our annual Annapolis Day. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming all the way out here early in the morning to join us. I want to thank our tech guy, Scott Weber, for bringing me today's signal of climate change. His flowers are out too early, but they are beautiful, so thank you. So thank you all for coming. I especially want to thank our first Vice President, Leslie Milano, and Joanne Corvos, who put today's program together, spent all night putting folders together for you and folding up table numbers. It takes a lot of work to set up all these appointments, pull the lunch together, get the legislators here. So part of why this matters, and part of why I continue to pound on people to join WDC, is to show the power of our organization, which is almost 65 years old at this point, and is a terrific political basis for women to make their values and their issues part of the political public agenda at the county level, at the state level, and beyond. I know a lot of us are involved in letter writing, get out the vote projects, registering people to vote, and we're going to be doing much more of that as the summer goes forward, as the spring and summer go forward. One of our bills, for example, and you'll hear more about this from our issue captains, was just mentioned in the Women's Caucus, where several of us were sitting, the pre-release centers, which Beth Tomasello, former president of WDC, who's here somewhere, there she is, and her sidekick, Lynn Olson, who's a current board member, have been working on for years, and is finally a priority. We just heard the new Senate president say it's one of his priority bills. We are, of course, supporting the Kirwan Commission, which is going to redesign and restart and fund the educational system that we need and that our children deserve. And of course, there is a synthetic turf bill in the mix as part of my personal crazy agenda. 250 tons of toxic plastic waste every 7 years, no big deal. So there are a lot of bills this year. 7 of them are our priority bills. You'll hear about them from our captains. The nice thing about today is, while we were a smaller group than last year, we are going to have a lot of meetings with our actual legislators. So if you look in your packet, which I think Leslie will walk you through, one of these is a schedule that shows, here it is. This sheet shows you which legislators, at what time, what room, and you already know why it matters. So, you know, the power of WDC is we get phenomenal speakers. On March 23rd, we have Mark Warner coming. So I hope you're saving March 23rd. I encourage you to invite a guest who needs to be introduced to WDC. Invite them as your guest, and then put the squeeze on them with Enid and Andrea at the membership table. One of the great beauties of joining WDC is it allows us to go before our council or our state legislature and say, we're here representing this many hundreds of politically active women and men in the county. So I think that's all I've got to say. I'm going to pass it off to Leslie, who's going to carry you through the rest of this morning's agenda.
Thanks so much, Diana. Check here. Okay, great. So I'm just going to speak for just 1 minute, and then I'm going to introduce all of the chairs that we have for our subcommittees. So my name is Leslie Milano, and I'm so excited to be chairing the advocacy area for WDC this year. And so we had made a few changes this year to the structure of our committees. One is that we have now a dedicated committee for education, and we have recruited different people who are doing great work, who are already WDC members, to lead up these committees for us. So, for example, in education, you're going to hear from Laura Stewart later. We also created a gun violence prevention and an environment committee. So that was really important to us, since these are really timely issues and really important issues for Montgomery County. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, and we had said this last year as well at this time, is that it's so important. The legislation in Maryland is so very important, not just to Maryland, but also to the country. Because Maryland here, we have, as many people who just came from our Women's Legislative Caucus can tell you, that we have a super majority here of Democrats. We have more, it is more likely that we are going to get through our legislation than a lot of other states. And just as Montgomery County is very frequently sort of a pilot, if you will, for legislation that then comes to Maryland as a state, Maryland also takes that role for the rest of the country. So the work that all of our chairs are doing is extremely important, not just to our small state, but to the broader country. So thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. I want to thank Joanne Carvos, who did so much work for today. I mean, and you can probably quantify that by the number of emails that I sent to her saying, thank you, many exclamation points over and over again. So thank you so much for all of the work that you did today. And thank you to our chairs as well. So I'm just going to acknowledge them as they come up to talk to you now briefly about the legislation that they have been working on. And it's been a great deal of work on their part. It's not just tracking legislation, it's talking with legislators, it's knowing what's happening on that issue, understanding the political climate for getting those pieces of legislation passed. So we are going to start with, actually, we're going to start with aging, because I think Lorna just walked in, so I'm going to give her a little chance to get some coffee, and then we're going to start with Joanne, and she's going to, each person's going to give about 2 to 3 minutes, very brief, about those bills. And you want to listen to that, because when you go to sit in with your legislators, you're going to have just about 15 minutes, and you'll deliver them the document that we have, and then you'll probably choose 1 or 2 pieces of legislation that you really want to focus on with them. So without further ado.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Joanne Corvus with I do the aging issue. I wrote testimony for 2 bills, well actually 3 bills, because one of them had a Senate bill, companion bill that was cross-filed. And both of them had something to do with the exploitation and fraud and abuse of seniors. And in Montgomery County, in Maryland, and in Montgomery County specifically, our population is aging, and there are actually more people over 65 than there are children 5 years old entering school. And particularly, this is an impact on women, because as the population ages, women are outnumbering men. And they are also in situations where they can be easily exploited. So the aging now is considered a vulnerable population, or vulnerable adults in the law. So the 2 bills were very similar, but in general, they put more emphasis on criminal law that had to do with vulnerable adults, older adults over a certain age that were either abused, financially abused, fraud, scam artists, and that sort of thing. And so I think we're going to see more of this as the population ages and the legislature starts dealing with this segment of the demographic. So that's aging. And
We'll go to
affordable housing.
Good morning. My name is Lorna Ford, and I am the recently assigned from the Affordable Housing Advocacy Subcommittee. It is my pleasure. You know, when there's a void, you just step in to get the work done. So our affordable housing legislative priority in 2020 is to prohibit evictions without just cause from leased premises. Nothing new. We've been doing this for several years. This has been one of our priorities, and the committee remains committed to the successful passing of legislation that will require landlords to give tenants a justified and stated reason for why the tenant's lease will not be renewed. Efforts in 2019 died in chamber after an unfavorable report by the Environment and Protection Committee. as a reminder, in case you didn't read the news report on it, the chairman, Delegate Barr, said at the time that he opposed the legislation because it would have put the burden of proof on landlords to demonstrate that a lease should not be renewed, which would likely lead to thousands of dollars in court costs. That's what he said. But I think what the committee failed to acknowledge was that unjust evictions lead to an alarming number of social problems that include depression, poor health, and involuntary job loss. So we still need to make sure that we advocate for this and very vigorously. So the bill that we're following this year has been renamed. It's called the Montgomery County Stable Homes Act, and the number assigned is House Bill 0821. And the Stable Homes Act will, again, require landlords to give tenants a justified and stated reason why the tenant's lease will not be renewed. And while many view this as a fundamental right of tenants, landlords continue to vigorously fight against this because what it does is ultimately removes their power over their tenants. So the first reading was February 3rd of this year, and it was referred to the Environment and Protection Committee, which is once again chaired by Chairman Kumar Barr and Vice Chair Delegate Dana Stein. So a hearing is scheduled for March 10th at 1 p.m. We will keep you posted on that. If there's anyone in the room who would like to volunteer with written or oral testimony or just anything else, as we pursue all things affordable housing, please do not hesitate to contact me.
Can I ask a quick question? Has there been a change in the bill other than the name of it since last year?
I could not find that there's been a change. They changed it from 2018 to 2019. They took out some language
Right,
that.
no, I remember that. I just wondered if he was against it last year, he's gonna be against it this year.
Yeah, I have not been able to find any substantive change from last year to this year, but I'll keep searching and let you know. That's it for me.
How many properties does he have as a landlord? A lot.
Should recuse himself.
Don't you think?
Hi, I'm Beth Tomasello, past president of Women's Democratic Club and the current chair of Criminal Justice and Public Safety, which is for the Advocacy Committee. We are supporting this year one standalone bill, which is SB 212, HB 233, which is assault in the first degree, suffocation, and strangulation. And we were asked to support this by Court Watch Montgomery. And the reason that this bill was introduced is that there were lower penalties for assaults that involved strangulation or suffocation, which happens a lot to women in domestic violence situations. It is highly correlated with later fatalities. So if a man has strangled a woman or tried to suffocate her, there's a huge odds, over 50%, that woman is dead. So it raises the penalties for that to make it consistent with other forms of assault. And that was a bill that was introduced in the Senate by our own Susan Lee. And I just checked, and it has passed, been voted favorably by the House Judiciary Committee. It has not been voted on yet by the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, but since it has 18 co-sponsors, we're optimistic on that one. Our biggest priority has been the companion bills that would require the state to operate a pre-release unit for women. The bills are the first one, which is HB 608, SB 682, requires the state to operate a pre-release center for women. And for those of you who don't know what pre-release is, it's essentially those halfway reentry services in the last 18 to 24 months of a sentence, when you hope that when incarcerated citizens are returning to their communities, are connected with jobs, counseling, reunited with their families. Large percentage of incarcerated women are single parents, heads of household, are hopefully getting therapeutic services, 75% of incarcerated women are there because they've suffered some kind of trauma during their lifetimes, usually at the hands of men. So it's a really, really, really important piece of having formerly incarcerated people return to their communities as full citizens with the support they need. There was a pre-release center in Baltimore for women until January of 2010, and the state closed it to save money. And they moved the women who were in pre-release status down to MCIW, the Correctional Institution for Women in Jessup, Maryland. It houses maximum security prisoners. So the women who are supposed to be reintegrating into their communities, into their jobs, are actually being housed with in a maximum security facility in the middle of nowhere. The jobs that are available are in a truck stop and in a Checkers fast food. This is from the mouth of a guard. And they have no transportation to get to where their families are, their children are. They have to pay if they get any kind of leave. So what the first bill does is it says the state must operate a pre-release center for women. The second bill, the Pre-Release Equity Act, requires that it be a standalone facility, i.e. not inside a prison. And that it has to be operated in or adjacent to the zip code where the largest number of women will be returning. And the reason for that is that pre-release is place-based, it is community-based, and so there probably will only be one. So we want it placed where most of the women will be returning to their community. And then the third bill is the Gender Responsive Pre-Release Act, and what that says is that it defines what kind of programming would be available in terms of educational services, therapeutic services, but it says it has to be evidence-based, you have to know it works. It has to be gender responsive, which is, it's what women need, not what men need, and programs that have been proven to work for women. For example, because of women's trauma, that is the driver for many of the addiction issues that land women in jail. Men is different. So you need trauma-informed care, and that is also there, and it also requires different kind of planning services, a plan for every woman who will be reunited in her community soon, a pre-release plan. So what I also want to say, the bills have been heard by the House Judiciary Committee. There's a lot of support for them. As Diana noted, the Senate President has made it a priority bill. The Legislative Caucus has made it, Women's Legislative Caucus has made it a priority bill. The hearings in the House, in the Senate Judicial Proceeding Committee, which may be a harder sell than the House, are today. And the committee's starting to meet at 12. We don't know when these bills will be heard. They'll be heard together. And so I would encourage any of you to please come over and fill the gallery, because it makes a difference. The advocates are asking anyone who's there to support to stand up, and it makes a difference. We put together, I'm sorry I'm talking too long, but we put together like a campaign to get all women's Democratic clubs around the state to submit testimony, and other organizations. And at the House hearing, they noted, one of the delegates noted that they had never seen so much written testimony for one bill before. And it matters. They need to know that women all across the state, women of all different backgrounds, are supporting this bill on behalf of women who are rarely seen and rarely heard. So I'm going to text Fran when the bill is coming up, and she can give the high sign.
What's the room bit?
The Judicial Proceedings Room, which is in the Miller Senate Office Building. I forget if it's east or west, but you'll see it. It's marked. So please, if you'd like to see a hearing, come see this one, because it's really.
Beth, why the three bills, and which one are you talking about that? I mean,
All three are being heard today together as companion bills, because they're all companion bills.
right, I understand, but are all three of them, one passes and the other two don't? Is that?
Well, if the only one that passes, it says there has to be a pre-release unit for women, that would be unfortunate because the Secretary of Corrections wants to open a co-ed pre-release facility at a prison called Rockbridge, an abandoned prison in Jessup. The women do not want it to be co-ed. They've had enough trouble with men. And they don't want it in Rockbridge because it's right across the street from MCIW in Jessup, so there still aren't jobs, there still isn't community, there still isn't transportation, you know, all of those things. So certainly the first two are really, really important because we want it located. And I don't know whether it was the bills are written not by the legislators, they're written by these bill drafting staff. So they may have decided they had to split it up because one of them is amending an existing statute, the other two are not. So the first two are hugely important. I mean, the third one is also, but you kind of hope that whoever's running this would do this anyway without having to be told by the legislature how they should be doing the programming, the therapeutic services, et cetera. But in case they are not, you know, we have these bills. But certainly those first two are really important because if the first one passes and the second one doesn't, I suspect what's going to happen is Secretary Green is going to build his co-ed, you know, do his co-ed facility in Rockbridge, and we do not want that. The advocates do not want that. It doesn't solve the problem.
And it's worth mentioning that there's 7 facilities for men. Isn't that the case?
9.
In
9.
communities with testing that recidivism
Yes.
is better when you're in communities near jobs, near
That's
housing, with
unquestioned,
your children.
right? Yeah, and that is absolutely unquestioned, and it's unquestioned that women need specific services, but the base, it's community-based pre-release. That's the whole point. It's reintegration into the community. Any job a woman might have at Jessup, she's gonna have to leave the job. There's no placement that can happen, permanent placement, when the women are in Jessup, because wherever they go back to, because nobody lives in Jessup except other prisoners, there's like 6 prisons there, you know, there's no jobs. You're not gonna be able to stay, so.
I would just add 2 more things. One is that the truck stop where they want to employ these women is notorious for prostitution and for drug dealing. So we don't exactly, that's not a good setting.
No.
And then the other thing is that these bills have been developed in conjunction with women who have been incarcerated. And so there's a reality base as well as the research base, there's also an experience base.
Right, the leaders on this legislation is an organization called Out for Justice, which is led by a formerly incarcerated woman, and the Maryland Justice Center, which is also led by formerly incarcerated women, and they are both of them geared toward helping formerly incarcerated people. So this is from their lived experience and from the lived experience of the formerly incarcerated women and men, frankly, who are working with them, because the men know what they got, and they're supporting women to get the same thing. So this bill has the support of Attorney General Frosch, a number of different organizations, faith-based organizations, 7 women's democratic clubs. There's a lot of support, but it would be great if anybody wanted to come over and stand in support and fill that room today. So, thank you. No, the hearings start at 12, but I'm gonna go over at 12 and I'll text Fran when it looks like we're coming up or we get a sense of where it is and what time, so that people don't have to leave for lunch, other than me. So, anyway, but please come. Thank you.
There's, speaking of judiciary, I got an email from Nancy Navarro last night about a bill they're gonna be considering today about ICE detention centers. And this bill would prevent the government or government entities in Maryland from contracting with private contractors for detention facilities for people in ICE custody.
Oh, that's
So,
really good.
Is that
yeah, I have the
state
bill
or
number if
county-
anyone's
the council?
interested. What?
State or county bill?
State. I think it's
State.
statewide. So I called Walt Stryker's office last night.
Oh, good. Oh, just another note, as you go visit your delegation offices, even though these bills are in the judiciary committees, in the House and the Senate, the Budget and Taxation Committee in the Senate And the House Appropriations Committee are going to play an important role because they're gonna have to appropriate the money to build this thing. And so those of you who are gonna be meeting with Mark Corman, Jared Solomon, Gabriel Acevero is involved in this, and he is very supportive. Kirill Resnick, Craig Zucker, and Nancy King. Nancy King is a co-sponsor, Craig Zucker is not. So be sure you talk also to your Budget and Taxation and Appropriations Committee members in your delegation to say, we hope they're gonna appropriate the money for the pre-release bill. So, and if they say, well, the fiscal note is high, that's because the fiscal note is completely false and intended to kill the bill. And that's been exposed in here. So there you go, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm not taking it away because you're talking too long. I'm taking it away to add a point, which is if people say, we need all the money for Kerwin, this is actually a beautiful intersection with Kerwin because these kids cannot succeed in school if mom's in jail. They have a much better success rate if a parent is home, if the parent is stable, if the housing is stable. So for people who say, oh, we need the money for Kerwin, tell them this is actually part of the concept of Kerwin, is making stable communities. So, Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Stewart. This is my first year, I think it's first time, actually. We've had an education subcommittee on an advocacy, but this was the perfect year because so much is happening here for education. We're in a pivotal moment. So I hope that all of you try to stay engaged, even if you don't have kids in the system, because this is really about the future of Maryland and Montgomery County. So I was told pick one bill, but I couldn't. So I did two bills, but they really go hand in hand. And it's super important that we get behind both of them. So the first one is the biggie, which I'm sure you've heard of the Corn Commission. So the bill that came out of the Corn Commission is called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. There is an organization that's helping advocates get out there for this, and actually we have a shirt right here that shows the organization. It's called Strong Schools Maryland. So please reach out to Strong Schools if you'd like to advocate because they have a great system in place. I've done their advocacy morning, and they're here like almost every day, so reach out to them. Let me explain what the blueprint is really quick in case you didn't know. But it is a huge education reform. We found out that we've been underfunding education in Maryland. And so what's happened is we've keep slipping down in the ranks, and now we're literally in the middle of the pack of the United States of America. I think this is a travesty, and we need to pull it around. The tests that came out that kids do all over the state, we ranked like 24th, 25th. So the first part of the blueprint concentrates on pre-K. So it expands pre-K, pretty much universal for 4-year-olds, and for people of need for 3-year-olds. More diverse and well-trained teachers. They will change the way they train teachers to teach our kids, and also have them compensated properly. So the goal is to have beginning teachers make $60,000 a year across the state, and right now some of them I think make like $45 the first year. But this will also mean they'll have more rigorous training, and also especially in classroom management, which is a big issue. The next section is career and college readiness. So more career tech education is called CTE. More rigor, more dual enrollment, and making sure that kids in their 11th and 12th grade is really preparing them for careers. So the goal is to have all their core subject matter done by 10th grade. The next focus is focusing money on struggling learners, ESOL, special ed, and where there's high concentrations of poverty. But I want to make a note because Dr. Kerwin said this during one of their hearings that they're not just focusing money on where there's high concentration, but also following kids that are at risk where they are, whatever school they're at. So we really want to target kids that are at risk and start when they're 3 years old, right? So you're just not targeting them when they're already in high school and they don't have the basis to build upon. So the next really important section is governance. So they're not just going to give money to all the counties, they actually have to have a plan that says we are spending the money the way it's supposed to be spent. So that's something that's missing in a lot of education funding, because the counties just get it and they move money around, they do what they want with it, and it's not really targeting the needs of the kids. So teachers are all on board on this, parents are on board, and it's huge. Of course, it needs to be funded. The funding ramps up over 10 years until we get $4 billion more per year to implement this. It is about, I think, 2/3 funded by the state, 1/3 across the state. The counties have to come up with some of the money. Now in Montgomery County, because I know that's a Montgomery County organization, so we're concerned, how are we going to be compensated? It's about a 1-to-1 match. The good news, the way we spend on education now, if we continue forward, because we go over with something called maintenance of effort, we don't have to worry about this until 2027. Okay, so we will need to raise more funds in Montgomery County, but we have a few years to figure it out. So that's the good news for us. Other counties are not positioned like that. The money that comes in today to education for Montgomery County, about 28% of the operating budget comes from the state. This new money is about a 1-to-1 match. We put in a little more than the state, but we go from 28% to like 48 or 49%. So I think that's a win for us on this new money, because we do better than we do now. And yes, it will have to be funded, so let's talk about funding streams. We are, WDC, we're supporting the bill that implements. We are not supporting a funding stream. There are lots of ideas out there. Feel free to like the idea you like best, but I encourage everyone to thank the sponsors of these funding bills, because they are offering solutions, a funding stream. Like, you can't get this done without funding stream. So I actually will give kudos to anyone who comes up with an idea. And then we can have that discussion. But there has to be ideas on the table to discuss. So please, encourage funding. Encourage that it's funded for all 10 years. There's ideas out there that doesn't do that. We can't get 5 years in and say, oh, never mind. Because it's implemented over 10 years, because we know it's a huge ask. So we can get there, but we just need to be vigilant and advocate. So the people that we should talk to, like, there's key people that are decision makers on this, is Craig Zucker, who is supportive, but we just want to make sure that he knows that we are all in on this. Cheryl Kagan and Nancy King. So if you have them on your list, please put a word in for Cohen for full funding all 10 years. So, and implementation. And I want to know if there's any questions, because this is a big, complicated bill, and I just want to make sure that you guys, everyone can understand. Yeah.
I just want to add that the two presentations I've heard from Rick Kerwin, whose commission is named, and some of you heard him at the luncheon that we had, he basically said we can't afford not to do this. Right now, the standard for graduating as career ready or college ready is to be able to do Algebra 1 and read at a 10th grade level, which is not the career force of the future to build the economy of the future to support us when we're all old ladies. So we can't afford not to do this is a message that's pretty clear, and they've probably already heard it, so they'll know that you know.
There was actually, they commissioned a report from the Sage Group, I don't know if you've heard of them, and they said that this actually pays for itself. Because we will have that economy, we'll be able to attract businesses because we'll have kids ready to go. Okay, so let me go on to the second one because I got the time signal. The Built to Learn Act. The Built to Learn Act is, I believe, HB 1300, SB 1000. It's all actually already been passed in the House, so that's really good news. Senate hearing was last week. Watch out for advocacy alert because we want to make sure that this gets to the floor. So what this does is it's a $2.2 billion bill for school construction. I don't know if you guys know, but we have a school construction emergency in Montgomery County. The funding streams aren't there for us, and we're going to have to cut back on projects. If this doesn't pass, we will lose projects that are in the CIP right now. That's our capital budget, so they're counting on this passing, so we really need this to pass. It means so much to kids, because we have kids in moldy buildings, we have kids in tent portables, they don't get playground space. I mean, it's ridiculous. So this bill came up last year, and the reason it didn't pass because it didn't get through Nancy King's committee. It passed the House overwhelmingly. We cannot get it through committee with Nancy King. So there was reasons, I understand that. We want to make sure she is all in for this year. What does it mean for Montgomery County? A lot. It means $400 million for our CIP. 20% of this bill is slated in the bill to go to Montgomery County. And right now, I think we're 100 million under in the county executives capital budget plan. It's up 100 million less than what was requested from the superintendent. So this 400 million would be over 10 years. And it's funded by gambling money, and it's from the stadium authority, so it's a bonding bill, so it doesn't have to have a tax or anything like that. It's bonding through gambling funds. So I hope you guys can support that. I think it's as important to her as current for Montgomery County. Because if you see some of our facilities, you would say, why is this in Montgomery County? How do we let it get this way? Because we've been underfunding the capital budget for years. So please, please support it. And any questions on the Built to Learn Act? Yes.
Yeah, just a comment, when you talked about bills for funding streams for
Yes.
Kerwin, one of the bills this year that a Montgomery County delegate has put in is HB 1543, which is Climate Crisis and Education Act, and it is basically going to take money from the oil and gas industry, and part of that money would go to funding Kerwin.
Is that
So
Hilgato's
it's a-
bill?
Pardon?
Is that Hilgato Freighter's
Yes.
bill? Yes. So
Yeah.
he's really big on the environment, and he wants to use that too. So I didn't want to go through all the bills because it would take me literally forever. But if you're interested in this, let me know, and I can send you more information about the funding streams. Yeah.
All right, one additional comment that Dr. Cohen is extremely passionate about the fact that funding it fully is
Yes.
critical to the juncture.
Fully.
You can't just take pieces of it and have it work. It's like an entire car with a couple wheels missing. You can't just have one or two or three. You've got to have it all in order for it really to work. So full funding is key to the presentation.
I can tell you just quickly, just so it's open for discussion, is the business community is very,
Louder.
the business community is very, very concerned with the services tax. So just about Maryland being, again, unfriendly business.
Like I said, take a look at the package of bills out there. Please support a couple of them so they know that we're serious. We can't say we're for Kerwin, but I'm against every single tax that you could ever come up with. No, we can't do that, or it'll just never get done. So please think about supporting one of the bills that includes, that will fund it.
And if you support one over another, that's awesome. But just don't be against it. I'm just pleading that just don't be against all the funding. Okay, so thank you so much.
So now I'm Amanda Farber. Amanda just got back from Mardi Gras in New Orleans, so I look better than Amanda. So Amanda was our lead on the environment bill that we chose this year. She and I have been in the trenches for many years on the synthetic turf stuff. So there are basically two bills. The one that we were really championing was quite narrow. It was basically to say, you can have synthetic turf if you want it, and figure out how to pay for it, whatever. You can deal with the injuries. But when you take it out, you cannot take the field from Richard Montgomery High School, from our fancy MCPS school, and dump it in Baltimore County on the side of Bird River and leave it there. 250 tons of toxic plastic waste, 40,000 shredded waste tires leaking into Bird River, which the state and the county was Kamenetz, County Executive Kamenetz was the county executive at the time, who ran for governor. You might remember he passed away. He, as a county executive and the state, put together multiple, like $5 million, I think, to clean that river because the community is so low income, they eat, drink, and bathe in that river. So they cleaned the river. MCPS, in its wisdom, hired a contractor who was to, quote, abide by all the rules and regulations, and sent it away, closed their eyes, and it's still sitting there 2 years later. We have people who've gone out and taken pictures. We have wacko members of our coalition who followed the truck out there and saw it happen. So we know where it came from. MCPS doesn't deny it. This bill would have said, you can do what you want on your fields, but you can't do that. Let's have a regulatory process that says, whatever you do, let's see what's called a chain of custody. Let's see somebody who's in charge of paying the contractor, and then the contractor tells you, I took it here, and then the people here tell you what happened to it. So you know that it is not becoming a toxic waste illegal dump. Unfortunately, it's not illegal because it doesn't qualify under any of the regulatory rules except as litter. If it's on private property, that's fine. There's a massive crisis across the US and Europe, every one of these fields. There are about 1,000 a year coming out in the US. That's 250 tons times 1,000. They've got lead, mercury, all kinds of endocrine disruptors, PFAS, this new chemical from the movie Dark Waters that Mark Ruffalo has put out, which is a huge endocrine disruptor. All kinds of chemicals in them. Unfortunately, that bill got a negative recommendation from the committee. This is the second year. The delegate, Mary Lehman from Prince George's, has said she will be back next year after we work with some of the people who are concerned about the business impact. I don't know how it's good business to dump toxic waste in the river. The second bill is Jared Solomon, who's from Montgomery County. He's District 18. He is a real environmental champion. He's one of the sort of the new state legislators. He's a real go-getter. The hearing is March 5th, and this is basically to say, you can have whatever kind of field you want, but you can't take funding from program open space. If you know anything about program open space, it's supposed to be, you know, preserving national parks on the side of rivers, not national, excuse me, state parks, or local parks. They either buy land for acquisition or they buy it for development for what's supposed to be a 20-year project. Synthetic turf lasts 7 to 10 years. You would think it wouldn't qualify, but nobody's ever come along and said, hey, this is a 7-year product that has to constantly be replaced at $1 million a shot, which is money that can't go to school construction, for example. Why is it qualifying for this? So his bill basically says, you go find another pot of money. We're not banning your product. We're not telling you you can't have it. We would like you not to dump it, but mostly go find another pot of money. So that's HB 1098. That's March 5th. We do not have a Senate cross-file, but it's been here several times since Aruna Miller was a delegate, if you remember her. And those of you who were in the Women's Caucus, on the left, at the very end, Senator Mary Washington, who's now running for a different office, was the one on Aruna's bill who asked the state, the rep from the industry, is there lead in your product? And he started saying, oh, there's lead in all kinds of things. And she said, is there lead in your product? And just kind of went, yes, there's lead in our product. So for 4 years, we've been using that video clip, and for 4 years, the industry has been too busy making money on a toxic product to come back and say, oh, wait, he was brain damaged by the lead. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So in other words, there is lead in this product. We're putting our kids on it. We're dumping it in rivers. So HB 1098 is March 5th. Jared Solomon. If you have any questions about it, you know who to talk to.
This year, we submitted testimony for the bill SB 208 under the rubric of gun violence prevention. And I see there's one honest man shirt out here in the crowd. Many of you may otherwise be volunteers there as well. So this is the bill that we're supporting and they're supporting as well. It's already passed out of the House. And what it would do is bring the background check laws up to standard as they are for shotguns to long guns, which are for rifles and shotguns, which they already are for handguns. One thing that Leslie mentioned is that in Montgomery County and in Maryland, we are often the leaders in, lots of kind of legislation that then spreads all over the country. And one place that Maryland has done this and been a leader is in the red flag laws. And now you see across the country, other states are adding red flag laws to their country, to their arsenal of prevention techniques. One thing that this bill does is ensure that background checks for private sales of rifles and shotguns would then show up for red flag checks by police as well as protection orders, which they currently would not. So it's of particular importance to this group and for us because for women and children and victims of domestic violence, we want those protections to show up in these background checks, and they currently would not. The bill has common sense exclusions for hunting and some of the issues that we've seen in previous years lead to it not passing, but it is currently stuck in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. So it is something that if you are meeting with Senator Smith's staff or Senator Waldstreicher's staff, I would definitely encourage you to raise. They've said, we know that they're checking with the federal authorities on certain definitions, and that seems to be the holdup of getting it out of committee, and we want to really make sure that it passes this session. And it's already passed out of the House. And then Senator Lee was the sponsor, so we can thank her for her efforts as well. Questions?
Is Senator Smith on board?
Yes, I believe Senator Smith is on board. There's definitely something that I don't know going on behind the scenes as to maybe why it's not being passed out of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. So I think the best that we could do is make sure that the pressure stays up and that they know that it's not just moms in red t-shirts, but it's women all across Montgomery County, of course, in the state that support this bill. I believe he's also supportive, and that's what he's indicated as well, and I would definitely raise it to his staff just to make sure that that exits the committee.
The next person is Margaret.
Yes.
Yes.
We're gonna have to pin them down. And I'm good.
Wait, I wanted to mention one thing. Sorry, before I sit down, I just wanted to mention that when we talked about the strangulation bill, that I think that this is something that we could bring up, those two bills, both before the Senate Judicial Proceedings, for affecting women in particular, criminal justice, and this handgun bill.
I'll be quick, I know that you heard the bells. Yeah, bells ringing, calling everyone over to the Senate and House. Anyway, healthcare in Maryland has really progressed. And the two bills that we're focusing on are preventive maintenance. Prevention being what happens if the ACA goes away, which at this point is a real possibility. And I think we have almost gotten complacent in this state because we have done so much to improve healthcare access through the legislature here. The last 3 years, there has been a House and Senate committee called the Health Insurance Protection Commission, that's been working to put in place a lot of the structures that are required to support healthcare access in Maryland. And right now, the two bills that we're talking about today, one of them, the consumer protections, takes the whole list, and there's about 20 of them, believe it or not, of consumer protections in the ACA, and puts them into Maryland law. So if the ACA goes away, you're still protected. And there are things that everyone probably knows about, perhaps keeping your child on your health care until 26, pre-existing conditions get support, you can't be kicked off because of that. But there's a whole lot of other things that are really important that underpin the structure of how economically the ACA is being provided. So things like how much money the insurance companies are allowed to keep from their profits before they have to give it back to their customers. So I won't go into them because we don't have a whole lot of time, but it's just a really important structural bill to get passed for all of us. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and this is one of them. The other one is, and that is in Health Government Operations and Finance Committee, and are being heard. The House HGO has been heard, but the Finance Committee will be this afternoon. And Senator Feldman, who is our D15 senator, has sponsored both of these bills. And he has really been a force in getting a lot of the healthcare in Maryland fixed. Anyway, the other bill is healthcare providers and health benefit plans, discrimination in provision of services. So what this bill does is takes the anti-discrimination statutes in the ACA and puts them into Maryland law so that hospitals and other providers cannot discriminate. So the first bill is the insurance companies. That's one of the things that listed 20 things that they can't do. We want to make sure that those anti-discrimination statute gets into Maryland law for providers and for hospitals and other healthcare providers. So hospitals and nursing homes and assisted living facilities and physicians' practices are all included under those. So I'll be brief, and any questions? That hearing is this afternoon also.
Thank you so much. And Ginger McCumber was not able to be here, so I'm just going to very briefly tell you some of the bills that we are working on for working families. I'm just going to talk about the two bills that we worked on last year and that we are working on again this year. One is it's a wage history bill, and actually, if you've been paying attention to county politics as well, this was actually Edmund Glass's first bill when he came into office. And so in Montgomery County, employers are not allowed, so it's essentially for the Montgomery, it's for the Montgomery County government, essentially, but they're unable to ask for your wage history, because that actually affects women much more than it does men. And so that was one thing that we were trying to do here as well in the state, is to eliminate the ability for employers to ask that very question.
Does this also apply to, when you apply, they wanted to know what your wage expectations are?
That is,
salary expectations?
I don't know if that is in this bill per se, but that it was in, I did this bill last year and it was in the bill last year. So we'll see what happens for this year. So, and then the other one is, that I really wanted to focus on here, is this Time to Care Act of 2020. We also supported this last year, Family Medical Leave Insurance Program, and it's essentially a maternity paternity leave policy for essentially in the private sector. So we're really looking at paid leave. And it's not just for when a child is born, but it's taking care of a newborn or newly adopted child, a family member with serious health conditions. If there's a military deployment in the family, there's a number of circumstances there. So I wanted to say thank you to so many folks here who have been working so hard on these bills. This is a wonderful variety of bills that is really going to make a big impact for women and children and families here in Maryland. So with that being said, we just have a few minutes before we move on to the next piece. Joanne's going to come up here and she's going to walk us through a couple of important pieces here in your packet. But one of the things that you want to keep forward here is your agenda. So you take that out if it's not already out. We will not be coming back to this room until lunch. So you can certainly keep your, you don't have to keep your bags here, but you can certainly keep your coats here. But we will also want to take with us these components here, which we are going to be giving to our legislators when we meet with them.
Okay, in the middle of your table, in those blue folders that look like they've been in my trunk for a month, those are gonna be the handouts for each of the delegates that, so only take a number that, of meetings that you're going to, per the schedule, over that in a minute. And maybe assign somebody in the group, probably stay in your district group, so you can go from meeting to meeting.
Yeah, do you have
And this is and then the schedule is also in there as well.
So if you look at your agenda, I have, the agenda has actual walking instructions. And so this is important because it's gonna tell you when you have to walk. We're gonna start moving fast now. So we have to, time is not our friend right now. And then you have the schedule of meetings. So each district has their, now it's not always, you have to look at the times and the buildings and the room numbers, because it's not always gonna be Senate side, senators on Senate side, delegates on House side. Sometimes they're together in one room to make it a little bit easier for us. So you have to plan your route. And the only change to this schedule is D19, which is my district, is Senator Kramer will be here for lunch, but he won't be here for the meeting. But Tanya and I will deal with that. So when we talked about looking at the bills that you could talk to, pick bills that you could talk to the legislators about that are important to you, use this sheet and look to see what committees they're on and what bills we were advocating for that match up to their committees. For example, if you're in District 19, you know, Vaughn Stewart is on the House Environment and Transportation Committee for HB 0821. So you want to talk to them about that. We're going to go between three buildings if you haven't been here before. This is the House building that we're in now. The State House is behind us a little bit on the hill. You can see the spire that goes up. And then the Senate building is right across the street. So we're going to go from the House to the State House side, to the State House, to the Senate. And the easiest way to do that is out these doors on the right, up to the State House. The entrance is right on the ground level, not up the big granite steps. You go right into the ground level to the right of the steps. And then the Senate, back out again, and then on that side of the street is the Senate. Now, if you've been here before, you know that there's tunnels. And if you really feel like you want to brave the tunnels and all the stairs, then there's also instructions to go through the tunnel, but I'm going to be going outside straight to the State House and back. So when we go from the Senate meetings to the House meetings, you're going to just go around the construction and cross the street to the office, to the House offices. The other thing, just a couple of tips, is that when you look for the offices, sometimes if they're a chairman or vice chairman of a committee, their offices are in the committee areas or right next to the committee meeting rooms. So you may say, oh my gosh, where is this room? Well, look where the meeting rooms are. And sometimes, especially on the House side, on Miller, East and West, they're right through the hearing, the corridor that goes to the hearing room, and the office area is right there next to the hearing room. So that might confuse you a bit, but that's just a little bit of a tip. So this, again, is what you're gonna, is a cover letter from Diana. And there's a list of the bills that we're advocating for, and this is what you're gonna be giving the delegates in each of your meetings. And then this is just a little visual called the 15-minute meeting pie. It gives you an idea of what a 15-minute meeting looks like. You really have to be careful on your time. They don't have a lot of time. There's a possibility, because this is just the way it is around here, that the legislator may not be back from the floor proceedings, or they may have had another meeting at the last minute, and you may end up meeting with staff. That's perfectly fine. The staff does a lot of work and they know what's going on. Any questions?
One, if we could, when you go into, I'm just gonna add one
Yeah.
little thing.
When you go into the meeting, that was great, thank you so much, Joanne. When you go into the meeting with your legislators, you're going to want to bring this document. You're going to say, as the document that Joanne was just speaking to mentioned, you want to say, hi, my name is Leslie Milano. I'm with the Women's Democratic Club, Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club, and we want to give you this document that lists our priorities. And then talk to at least one of the legislation bills that we were just talking about this morning that is very important to you, that you think that would be a good idea for this senator or delegate to support. So don't be shy, be confident. You're representing 600 people that couldn't be here today, but you are here today, and so we're very happy that you are. And so go in there with the force of 600 people to let them know that these are very important bills that we really want them to support. So we're going to then walk to, and can you tell us exactly where we're
So right now, we're getting our coats on. And we're going to walk out these doors. You can follow me. If you go down, take a left out of here, we're gonna just go straight out the doors. Again, we don't have to go in through security. Only do security on your way in. And then we're gonna take a left and go up to the State House around the construction. There's more security there. At that point, we're gonna go up to the gallery that observes the floor proceedings, and that's up 2 flights. So once we get in there, in case you lose me, there you go through security, there's a security guard, and then you take a left. There's elevators on the right, and then marble stairs on the left, and you go all the way up to the top. The elevators don't hold a lot of people, so you'll have to wait for them to come back down again if you don't want to take the stairs. And then we'll all congregate up on the 2nd floor and try to find some seats up there in the gallery.
Joanne, tell us the name of the location, the Senate Gallery.
It's the Senate Gallery. We're on the Senate side. So when we go up to the 2nd floor, there's House and Senate. And you'll see up on top, House, Senate, there's actual brass signs up there. And so we're gonna be observing the Senate side. And once we get there, we'll have play it by ear, because I'm not exactly sure, how many seats are gonna be and what, but we'll figure it out. And then keep looking at your time, because if you have meetings on the Senate side, you want to give yourself time to get out, go over to the Senate office building, and go through security. Security is pretty fast here.
So that's great. And so just one other note is that we don't have a lot of time to go, we tried to give a little bit of time to move through, but we do have, we're starting in the Senate, we're going to listen in on the Senate, then you have meetings with senators. And then you come back over here to the House and you have meetings with delegates. And then you come back to this room to have lunch. So we start in the Senate, go to the House, and then we come back here for lunch. Okay, so really try to get to those meetings because they're expecting us and it was hard fought to sort of, figure out all of that. So thank you so much and let's go.